In the name of the God who created us, in the name of the Christ who teaches us, in the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us throughout our lives, welcome home, children of God. Peace be with you. Morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church this morning as we gather together as God's people in God's name. And I welcome you this morning, whether you are joining us here in person or joining us online this morning from our YouTube feed. If you are joining online, I invite you to please take a moment and just register your attendance, say good morning in the YouTube chat function to the right. And if you're here, of course, we'll count you up as well, and then we'll tally up everybody who's here or who's online. And we will give $1 for every person joining us in worship today to a local or international ministry. Today is a second Sunday of the month, so that means our recipient today will be ARM, Area Resource Ministries. It's a wonderful little ministry that's just a block or two from here, right kind of behind the Ingalls, and they help to provide non-perishable food and other assistance and resources to residents throughout Carter County. And so you are supporting that ministry simply by giving of your time this morning to worship, and I thank you for that gift. Let's see. Ginger, we still need liturgists, don't we?
We need some for the first Sunday in March.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So Julie's going to be reading this morning. I think we've got a couple of people lined up for the rest of February, but beginning the first Sunday in March and thereafter, we need readers. Really all that's involved in that is leading the call to worship and reading the whatever is the reading for the day from up here. So it's an easy job. Anybody's welcome and invited to do that. There's a sign-up sheet right up here on this blue table at the front. Just put your name and your email address, and we will give you what you need to read several days in advance so that you have a chance to look over it and let me know if you have any questions. But we'd love to get as many different voices and faces up here as possible. So please take a moment and volunteer for that if you'd like. This morning is our Evolution Sunday. We're kind of taking the whole month of February to celebrate science and faith. And if you've joined us downstairs, Julie gave a wonderful talk last Sunday on evolution, kind of an overview of it. This morning we looked a little more specifically at plant communication and evolution. We're going to continue that, I think, 2 more Sundays, Julie. So you can join us online through the Adult Forum Zoom, and that link is in your e-news every week, as well as on the church calendar on the church website, or you can join us in person downstairs in Martin Hall, and we welcome you to do either way. And we will have our official Evolution Sunday celebration here this morning in church as we do worship, but we'll kind of continue that theme throughout the month. So I think that's all the announcements I have. Have I missed anything anyone is aware of? Well, fantastic. Then let me invite us to continue our worship service as we are gathered here as God's people. And as we move into worship, we start, as we do each week, with the basic core of our gospel. God loves us all without condition and without exception. And in that love, we all of us, reflect the image of God. And God's image is lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, straight. God's image is black, brown, Asian, indigenous. God's image is male, female, non-binary. God's image is rich and poor, able-bodied and disabled, young and old, suffering and rejoicing. We all of us bear the image of God. And we are all beloved and valued. So welcome, beloved community. We give thanks, as we do each week, for the ancestral Cherokee land on which we are gathered, and for the loving waters of the Doe River watershed that nourish us. As we enter this time of worship, we pledge ourselves to work for truth and reconciliation among all peoples, and respect for creation in all that we do. So let us worship together. And Julie, I think we are skipping the choral introit this morning, so I'll invite you to come on up and lead us in our invitation to worship.
Good morning and welcome to Evolution Sunday. The invitation to worship this morning is by Reverend Jessica Rodella. Please join me in the sections that are written in bold print. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we here are descended from stardust, gathered of galaxies, created of carbon. From the first tremblings of a vibrant planet, we evolved. We carry the memory of the cosmos, the evolution of our cousins, the encoding of our kin, the adaptations of our cultures. From planet to people, our lives matter only as much as we can mean to make it so. And it is infinitely, possibly, probably so. From the plan and planes of the astral and ancestral, we transformed and are transforming still.
Actually, both of our hymns this morning are hymns that were composed, not specifically. The first one is composed specifically for Creation Sunday. The second one is one we, I think, sing just about every Creation Sunday. But the tunes to both are familiar to us, I hope, so you'll find the words printed in your bulletin or on the screen if you're joining online. I invite us to rise in body or spirit and sing together our first hymn, We Are Children of Creation.
Children of creation, star flung from the west, framed with passion and desire, star-born, earthbound, we inherit ancient ties that make us kin, spun by cosmic fiery spirit at the point where worlds begin. New frontiers defy old boundaries as we probe both time and space, seeking to decode the quantities of human race. Alpha time the human heart to beat in a body shaped and molded from the earth beneath our feet. God, you made us in your image, made your children to be one. How can we of common lineage your will on earth be done? Word of God made flesh among us, sing your passion and desire to create a world with justice. Breathe in us your spirit's fire.
Good morning. I'm repeating the meditation that many of you have done before, and to quote a teacher from long ago, he always said, "So you'll remember." But it's understood that in the time of Jesus, that there was a Jewish creation story that people made a deliberate effort to relive as a personal experience. So it's an opportunity of rebirth that offered an experience of reconnection with the beginning of creation as full and complete human beings, being born from the first beginning. And I think that this is in one way, when we hear about all these fabulous things that Julie's talking to us about and Brian's planning for his sermon today, sometimes it's easy to separate or not get it, how we are connected. So this meditation is an opportunity to think about the beginning as your story, my story. This is how I began. So we're going to use two words from Aramaic. The first one is abun. Just say it out loud so you can say it in your head. Abun and alaha. Alaha. Abun is the word that Jesus uses to address the sacred, the creative source, pointing us back to the creation as original blessing. But it also speaks to the process of creation that's going on right now, right now, right now, continuing. And alaha is the remembrance that we are a part of sacred unity. So I invite you to find your meditation posture, wiggle in your seat, and sit upright and tall. Put your hands in your lap. And you might want to place a hand on your heart. So just begin. Close your eyes and feel the breath coming and going. And as you breathe, allow the word abun to find its way into the rhythm of your breath. Use abun to focus a journey in your awareness back, before the present moment, back to when you were a child, even further back to before you had an individual existence. Perhaps using the word abun, you can feel some connection to the past through your own mother and father, your other relatives, feeling that breath that comes to you now as part of breath before coming through them. Using abun, breathe back further and further, imagining, visualizing a time before there was even perhaps a human species, when there was no human face to be seen. The breath that was going through us was part of nature, connected to those other beings. The breath that was going through us connected to all of nature, back even further as this planet was forming, as the solar system was forming, as this galaxy was forming. Using abun to go back as far as you can in your awareness, to go back further to that very first moment when something came forth from nothing, or when the knowable came from the unknown. We are connected through breath, through sound, through vibration, to that very first moment of creation. It began with the ah of abun, and the whole breath of this long abun takes the whole time to this present moment. Let's also, as we feel this whole connection from the beginning, affirm our unity with all that could be and with all that will be. Let's breathe in abun and breathe out the word Allah. Breathing in from this entire past, this ancient story, from the great mystery, and breathing out that we are moving toward unity, toward completion as human beings. Breathing in abun and breathing out Allah. For a few breaths, breathing in abun, breathing from the beginning and into the future. Out with Allah. We are moving toward unity, toward peace, toward completion as human beings. As we reach closure, we give thanks for what we have received, a sense of fullness or completion, a sense of peace, or at least a pause from our busy lives. We affirm at the end of our meditation, Amen. This is the ground, the rooted confidence from which we will live our lives in the future. Say it with me, Amen. And a special gratitude to Neil Douglas Klotz for creation of this meditation.
The reading this morning is from Job 4, verses 1 through 11. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered, "If one ventures a word with you, will you be offended? But who can keep from speaking? See, you have instructed many. You have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have supported those who were stumbling. And you have made firm the feeble knees. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed. Is not your fear of God your confidence, and the integrity your ways your hope? Think now who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. The roar of the lion, the voice of the fierce lion, and the teeth of the young lions are broken. The strong lion perishes for lack of prey, and the whelps of the lioness are scattered." The second part is from 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But for the prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have known fully before, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love.
Thank you, Julie, for reading this morning. Rebecca, thank you for that meditation. And So the first reading that Julie read for us this morning was from the book of Job. And we don't know a whole lot about the authorship of the book of Job in the Bible, but we suspect that there are some parts of it, especially some of the poetic parts that make up the middle of the book. And Julie, in fact, read one of those poetic parts this morning. That some of those poetic parts may be some of the oldest writings in the Hebrew Bible, and that some of them may date back to as early as the 7th century BCE. And I mention that because that first reading that Julie read for us raises what I'll call an existential question. And I mentioned the age of that reading to point out that this question raised in our first reading is not a new one in the history of humanity. And it's the question of evil, of why good people suffer. And if that's a question from, the 7th century, then BCE, we're looking at a question that's, 9,000 years old at this point? Been around for a while. People have been asking the question of evil and why good people suffer for thousands of years. So first, let me give you just a wee bit of Job's backstory if you're not familiar with the book. The book of Job is a parable, and it's a parable of a man who was blameless and upright, who feared God, who turned away from evil. And so Job was blessed with a large family and considerable wealth for his day. In the kind of opening preface to Job, we learn that Job had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, 500 donkeys, and many servants. It's an incredible amount of wealth for his day. So Job is a man who had it all. Until this heavenly being approached God with something of a bet. The heavenly being in the book of Job is the Hebrew word ha-satan, and it's just a word, it simply means the accuser. We generally in English translate that as Satan. I'll just use Satan in the recap here because so Satan comes to God with this accusation, essentially. And the accusation is that Job is only blameless and upright because he's been so blessed, because God has blessed Job. That the only reason that Job acts in this blameless and upright manner is because he's got everything in the world, so it's easy to do. That God has put a heavenly fence around Job to keep evil from befalling him. So then Satan taunts God and says, "Take away Job's blessings, and Job will curse you for sure." And then what ensues is this tragic tale of Job losing everything. So first he loses his wealth, and then he loses all the members of his family, his kids, his spouse. Finally, he loses even his own health. And Job's friends come around to console Job. And that's where Julie picked up this morning. One of Job's friends, Eliphaz, questions Job about his loyalty to God. And Eliphaz says, "What did you do wrong, Job? Think now. Who that was innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever cut off? Because as I have seen, those who plow iniquity and trouble are the ones who reap the same." Do you follow that? To Job's friends, it's a pretty simple formula. We reap what we sow. And so the only reason that so much tragedy would befall Job is if he had done something wrong. If Job had done something to deserve what he got. Because in the worldview of Job's friends, bad things happen to bad people, and good things happen to good people. And the whole book of Job, that goes on for another 35 chapters after what Julie read this morning, the whole book of Job explores that ageless question of why the universe does not work in the way that we feel like it should, in the way that maybe we want it to work. Our sense of fairness, Indeed, our sense of maybe divine justice even leads us often to imagine a quid pro quo universe, so that those who live virtuously are blessed by God, and those who do evil suffer a painful fate. Except that the book of Job challenges that presumption. Job reflects, I suspect, the life experience of many of us. And that's that things don't always work that way. That sense of fairness in the universe doesn't always pan out the way we feel like it should. And that no matter how hard we try in life, there is nothing that can protect us from the inevitability of pain. And I suspect these past couple of years may have brought home that sense of injustice to many of us. People who have done everything that we're supposed to do, masks, vaccines, social distancing, people have still gotten sick, and in some cases died, even with following the rules, even with doing what we're supposed to do. This pernicious virus has managed to take hold of many people. But then on the other side of that equation, we can look at the political stage and see people who spread lies and foment hatred, that spend public money for personal gain, that abuse others and ignore the needs of those they are elected to serve, not only escape punishment, but often reap reward for doing so. On either side of the equation, in our lives, in our communities, in our nation, that sense of justice of God, of things working like we feel like they're supposed to do, that sense of divine justice just feels absent. Deep in a forest in South Africa, a herd of giraffes spot an acacia tree. And so those giraffes make their way up to this acacia tree, and they begin to take a nibble from some of the leaves way up high on the branches. That first bite, the acacia leaves, is pure deliciousness. But then after a few bites, those leaves begin to turn acrid and unpalatable. Now, the giraffes could move on from that acacia tree and find another nearby acacia tree, but the rest of those acacia trees around are now also inedible. At the first sense of danger, that acacia tree, the first one that the giraffe started to take a nibble from, that acacia tree has now sent out a warning to all the other nearby trees in the forest. And it's alerted them and told them to go ahead and proactively release the same toxic chemical in their leaves that's prevented the giraffes from eating the leaves of the initial tree. And so even the leaves of these surrounding acacia trees, ones that the giraffe has not come close to or touched yet, even the trees around the initial one, they've been notified to go ahead and make their leaves taste unpalatable. They've been warned that the giraffes are coming. Underneath the forest floor lies this intricate, interconnected, dynamic web of communication between organisms, including fungi, plants, bacteria, and even animals. And in fact, 90% of the plant life on Earth, 90% of the plants and trees on Earth are involved in this mutually beneficial network. And the superorganism that's underground that connects all of these plants, trees throughout the world, is called mycelium. And if you made it to Adult Forum this morning, Julie gave a wonderful talk about mycelium. And you heard her talk a little bit about what this amazing superorganism can do. If you missed it this morning, have no fear. That's recorded. We'll post that on our YouTube channel and share a link later this week. She'll be talking more about that for the next couple of weeks, so I hope you can participate. But a little brief word about mycelium. Most of us are probably familiar with the reproductive part of mycelium. We know them as mushrooms, little caps or other fungi that sit above ground. And if you see a mushroom in the forest, it's a sign that underneath that mushroom lies part of this network. And what exists under the forest floor and extends upward in mushrooms is an interconnected community. But this ecosystem is even more than just a communication network. It does more than just let plants talk back and forth to one another. When a tree is cut down in the forest, other nearby trees reach out to this victim tree, to the cut down tree, and they, through their root tips and through the mycelium, and they send life-giving nutrients from their roots to the roots of this stump. They send water and sugar and other nutrients that the tree, the stump, can no longer connect because it doesn't have leaves and branches out. And those nutrients are sent through this network of mycelium. And I'm going to personify the mycelium a little bit here as I talk about it. But this altruistic act from neighboring trees that help to keep the stump alive, they can help keep the stump alive for decades and in some cases even centuries. Take a moment to think about that. A tree cut down in the forest, a stump, can be kept alive for decades or centuries by other surrounding trees sending what they collect and manufacture through photosynthesis, collect nutrients, send that through the mycelium to keep this stump alive for tens or even hundreds of years. And that doesn't even just happen for trees of the same species either. Trees will send the same kind of nourishment to trees even of a different species. And I share all that because in this kind of amazing thing happening under the forest floor, going on right beneath our feet, there's no discernible benefit for the rest of the trees to do that, to send water and nutrients and everything to this stump. The stump will almost never grow back into a tree. It will almost never be able to reproduce or spread its DNA, so there's no kind of evolutionary benefit to passing on its genes for the other trees to keep this stump alive. And yet the surrounding trees act to help encourage the health of the entire forest, including nourishing beings that are different from themselves. So hold that in your mind for a second as we go back to Job. The question that's taken up in the book of Job supposes that we live in a world, in a universe of cause and effect. Every action results in an equal and opposite reaction. Job must have sinned, therefore he deserved to be punished. And I know that our experience often tells us otherwise. That as much as we see that bad things do happen to good people, as much as we see that evil around us is not always punished, I still think at some level, many of us want to believe that there's a larger plan, that God is in control in some way, and that God will ultimately balance the scales. And that if justice is not somehow served in this life, then maybe it will be in the next. Because the alternative is a universe in which no one is in charge. A universe of random consequence. An unpredictable universe. And that can be far more terrifying. You all know that we are here today celebrating Evolution Sunday in our church. And this whole month, we're celebrating the contributions of science to the life of faith. In this chapter from 1 Corinthians that Julie read, toward the end of it, Paul is writing that when he was a child, he thought and he spoke and he reasoned like a child, and then as he matured, he began to put an end to childish ways. For me, kind of the faith of my childhood lasted well beyond my childhood, well into adulthood, because I wanted to believe in a God who was in charge of everything, a God who had a plan and could control the outcome, even when experience seemed to contradict that. And so part of my own faith journey has been letting go of that kind of faith. Letting go of the kind of faith that I think Job's friends have. The kind of easy faith that Job himself resists throughout the book. And that's the faith that expects God to take care of everything, to right all the wrongs in the world, to reward the faithful, and to punish the unjust. And so when Paul writes about losing that kind of childhood faith himself, it's not just writing to give up on the idea of God. That's not what Paul is doing. He's writing to say that his understanding of God has evolved, that it's matured, that it has grown into something new. And so the injustice in the world, the kind of injustice for which Job's friends wanted an explanation, Paul suggests that the response to that kind of injustice in the world is not to just trust that God is going to fix everything. That's a childhood faith. Paul says instead that his faith has evolved to see that the response to injustice is not waiting on God to fix it. It's for us to love. And I know that that passage that Julie read, the one from 1 Corinthians, often gets read at weddings. And it's great for weddings. But Paul's not writing for a wedding. Paul's writing about how to love for the rest of our lives, not on a day that we may meet or celebrate our marriage to a partner or a lifetime spouse. Paul's just talking about how we live in the world. And the way Paul encourages us to live is to love one another, to love everybody with that kind of love that is willing to give of itself for the well-being and the benefit of another. When I first read about the communication through the forest facilitated by mycelium, it fascinated me. And not because it's an evolutionary miracle, though it certainly is that, but it fascinated me because right here, right around us, right underneath our feet is this tremendous interconnected biome of trees and fungi and bacteria that are all, if you'll excuse the personification again, that are teaching us how to love. And I know even as I say that, love seems like a strange word to use when we're talking about trees and fungi. We tend to think of love as a human emotion, an affectation toward something. Another person, a pet, a chocolate cake, whatever. I mean, I love chocolate cake too, so fair use of the word. But Paul's understanding of love is that it's an action. It's an action that contributes to the well-being of another. And here is this magnificent biome right underneath our feet that is working to do just that. Right? Nourishing a felled tree stump, warning other nearby trees of impending danger, joining together to help the whole forest communicate for the good of the whole forest, even if there's not a benefit to this particular individual organism. That's love, as Paul describes it. And love is the path that God chooses to respond to injustice. We need look no further than the life of Jesus to see that. He doesn't spend his life meting out justice on those who wrong him. Instead, he responds by teaching us how to love. Faced with injustice and suffering and darkness in the world, I think we need look no further than the trees around us to find the divine response. The suffering and injustice and anguish around us then become the crucible through which we can not only experience God, but participate with God by responding in love. I think evolution is a celebration of nature's response to the hardships and challenges of life in the universe. Because at least in this case, nature has evolved to learn that the best and the only way to survive in this universe, in this world, to survive and to thrive, is to love. So our question here this morning is, can we evolve enough to do the same? Blessed be. Amen. I say this simply, but one of the ways I think we respond in love is by sharing of what we have, just like we learn that trees do, to help try and benefit those around us. And one of the ways we can do that is through our offering. So I'll invite us now to share as we are able.
Shines on me, and to the Son, whose faith has fallen me, and to the Spirit, whose love has set me free, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be.
Invite us to remain standing as we sing our closing hymn this morning. This is one I think is familiar to most of us, not composed specifically for Evolution Sunday, but I think we sing it about every year, and it's just a wonderful celebration of this magnificent world that supports us and every living thing on it. So let's sing Blue Boat Home together.
ocean, standing on these mountains and plain, far away from rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe, the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning o'er the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on. Great the infinite sea before me, sing the sky, my sailor, a song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe, the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Beloved siblings in God, as you go forth from here, my only charge to us this morning is, can we learn from the trees? Can we learn from them how to love, that we can survive this world together? As you go forth from here this day, beloved siblings, may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind blow always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of her hand. Amen.
Well, you know, there's some